Hello, this is Daryl Ehrlich with the Billings Gazette, and thank you for joining us for our Vietnam Voices series. It is September 17th, a little after 1:30, and today I've got Will Crain in studio with me, and I can't thank you enough for joining me here today.
I'm very glad to be here, Daryl.
Great. So I always start at the beginning because I'm not smart enough to start anywhere else. So I want to start. You were in the U.S. Army as a draftee from 1967 to 1969, but I want to step back before that. Let's set up. Where was Will Crain before the Army came calling?
I ran away from home in '64 right out of high school. I went to a Catholic high school, but I was an atheist. I was born an atheist, and I'm still one. So Dad was to the right of Attila the Hun, was a little difficult to deal with. So I ran away from home, and I headed to, at least my first stop for a trip around the world was Jackson, Wyoming.
Okay.
And so I landed there in February of '65, and ended up working at the ski lodge before the tram was even built, and met a woman, and not long after that, we decided to get married, and my draft notice had come saying I was going to be drafted. Let's see, when do we get married? Somewhere in October, I think. So we hurried up a wedding in that year. I guess that was '67. So anyway, I got married, and then my draft board was in Los Angeles, which is where I'm from, which is where I grew up, in San Fernando Valley, where I lived with lemon groves and orange groves and groves of everything from hell to breakfast and egg ranches and all that. But right. So I got back there, and the draft board calls me in, and they called me out of line and said that essentially I wasn't moral enough to go kill, because I had a civil offense that hadn't been waived. Somewhere in the early teen years, I got picked up for joyriding with a bunch of other kids. So, if you're joyriding, you're not moral enough to kill.
Right.
And so I'm married. It's new. I'm clueless about marriage, and I ended up getting a job with Lockheed with a secret clearance and working on a Black Hawk. It wasn't just before I got there that Gary Powers had gone down in one of those spy planes. We're always spying on everybody.
Right. So I just want to back up because there's an irony here. You weren't moral enough to kill, but you got a secret clearance.
Right. So
wow. Yeah. I'm just trying to figure it out, but that's okay. You keep on going. I'm sorry. I just want to.
Yeah, it was a job with Lockheed. I was getting 20 some bucks an hour, and that was pretty darn good. I was happy with that. It was working templates for how they make the parts of the plane. They hammer them together and shape all these metal parts, and it was an experimental division. All I did was write names down and move this template. And a template could be a huge piece of steel, and they'd wrap metal around it and put it where it belongs and take it back and pick them up. And it was nice. That was in Burbank, California. I don't know if that's still going on, but that was nice. So in about, I got drafted in May. So somewhere around April, they called me again and said, I guess I was now moral enough to go kill.
Long time for your moral development.
Yeah. And there's no way I could be a conscious objector. I just simply didn't have the background for that, but I did not want to go. I had a pretty decent education at this Catholic high school. I knew geopolitics. I knew that all the money that we put into the Marshall Plan for France went to their military to colonize South Vietnam. And so I knew there was something stunk in this whole deal. I did not want to go. I thought it was all wrong. But what are you going to do?
Yeah. So they all of a sudden changed their mind when they needed.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So did that must have come as kind of a shock? Here you thought, well, they're done with me, and then they have a change of mind?
No, I knew that they were coming.
Okay.
Yeah. But so I went. I showed up at the what do they call it? The draft center, and we all lined up, and they picked out a couple of guys because they had syphilis, and they didn't get to go.
There's that's a heck of an incentive.
Yeah. So my dad said, he dropped me off. He said, well, here's $20 for some spending money, and have a nice war.
Wow.
So Dad and I were not at all close.
Right. Had he fought? Had he been in the
He was
service?
in the Seabees, and he was on Okinawa, Saipan, building runways.
Okay.
So he did serve, but I had no desire to follow in any military footsteps.
Sure.
A lot of guys.
Yeah.
My dad was in it, and my dad was in it.
Right.
Well,
So then where you go to the induction center, then you're $20 and have a nice war,
Yeah.
and then so let's go for what'd you do? Where'd you go after that?
well, so our first stop was Fort Ord, which is now a national park, I believe, thankfully. But we were in Fort Ord for maybe 2 days, and there was a spinal meningitis outbreak. So they shipped us off to Fort Lewis, Washington. So I was in an infantry training camp there. I could see Mount Rainier, that was pretty. And so I'm in basic training. It was ugly. Fall in, fall out, tension, not attention.
Wow. Just the regular.
Regular infantry basic training. I think pretty much basic training is basic.
Right.
It's then after that basic training, I don't know how many weeks ever that was. It was always one day too much. Then I was shipped to Fort Polk, Louisiana,
Okay.
for advanced infantry training.
Okay. Tell me about advanced infantry training.
Well, that would have been in the early summer of 67, and it was hot and muggy.
So you spent the summer of love in Fort Polk, Louisiana, courtesy of the U.S. Army.
Yeah, it was nice.
Right.
Not that nice.
Right.
You meet more guys, you get a little closer to people. I had one buddy and managed to learn when to volunteer and when not to volunteer. And the sergeant said, are there any artists in the group? And I immediately raised my hand, and it turned out that day, and I volunteered to do some artwork for the company sergeant. I had to write everybody's name in their boots. Yeah, that's pretty artistic, huh?
Right. That sounds like it requires a whole lot of,
But, I didn't have to run. I hated running, and I hated running with this backpack with rocks in it. Double time was not fun for me. I hate running, and I was glad, though, so when I was originally called for my draft, I was living in Jackson, Wyoming, in all those beautiful mountains, and one thing I kept thinking in my head was, gosh, wherever I'm going, I don't want it to be in the mountains. Because
Right.
running uphill was even worse than running on flat ground.
Right. Just one of the things that,
Yeah, I know you think about little things like that. But anyway, so I went through advanced infantry training, Fort Polk. I didn't take leaves or go anyplace because wife was in Jackson, Wyoming, and made some phone calls, and you're feeling pretty lonely and whatnot. And, you get some books, and I was an artist, so I was always drawing. I managed to get an art book and draw. Then when advanced infantry training was over, my actual training was for mortars, which is 11 Charlie, and had I been regular infantry, it's called 11 Bravo.
Okay.
So then I think there's another group for recoilless rifles, 11H, but So I was trained for mortars, where you put the mortar in, hang it, and shoot off these mortars. I did not like that. It was noisy. It hurt your ears. They didn't have real safety features like earphones or earplugs or anything like that back then. You just, boy, when you hang a mortar around, it goes off. It's loud.
Yeah.
You always see them in the movies. It's not nice. So consequently, my hearing's not really good at all. So then you get a 30-day leave after advanced infantry training because I had orders to go to Vietnam.
Okay. So it's a foregone conclusion.
Oh, yeah, I got the orders.
Right, yeah.
They did call me in office to see if I wanted to be an officer, OJT. I must have scored high on some test or whatever. So I said, thanks but no thanks. I am not interested in leading anything here. And I got out of being an officer, thankfully, and then let's see. So I can't remember exactly when, but somewhere between advanced infantry and getting to Vietnam, the USS Liberty had been smashed by the Israelis. So that was a bit concerning. What's going on over here? A bit disconcerting for me, anyway, because like I said, I was politically savvy before I went to Vietnam.
Okay.
I was politically savvy coming out of high school. So then my next orders were to be at some airport in Oakland. Mm-hmm. And that would have been October 10th, 1967. And it was raining, it was chilly. We all get on an airplane that's, not marked like other planes. It's like, there was a couple of flight attendants. And there's a bunch of guys, it's all full of guys. We're all going to Vietnam. It's pretty quiet the whole trip. So I think we landed in Hawaii, then Okinawa, and then we landed at Tan Son Nhut, I believe is the airport in Saigon. Mm-hmm. Got out of the plane, whoa, it was 100 degrees and the humidity was 100. So
it was just like walking into a hot shower.
Yeah. I was like, this is weird. And then you see people in black pajamas on everywhere, and you heard about these during training. Everybody wears black pajamas.
Yeah.
It's a whole different, it's different.
Yeah. As a guy who was a little bit older, or a little, were you a couple?
I turned 21 in the rice paddies.
Okay, so yeah, you're about standard, maybe just a hair, but you'd also been, I want to say, more observant, maybe, and also had been, or at least politically aware. You go over there, and it sounds like you understand really quickly. This is a much different culture and a much different place.
Yeah, and I also, fortunately, I guess the one thing that Dad did for me was got me into the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
So I was aware about what nature is and how to identify birds and snakes and live. If I had to live in the wilderness for a period of time, I could rub two sticks together. I would know that, and my survival instincts were greatly enhanced by the Boy Scouts.
Okay.
So I had a certain amount of confidence going in that I was going to make it.
Okay. Did you? So you weren't necessarily fearful?
I've thought about that, and I read the other papers, and I watched other articles, this TV things. It was a different level of fear. I remember you go, after you land, you get 5 days of in-country to acclimatize you to the situation. And like the second day, the sergeant said, well, y'all ought to be going to church. There's one down the road about 100 yards, and the chaplain is going to be speaking. And So, oh my God, do I have to go? You're all going. So I don't know what kind of preacher it was. I don't remember if the guy was Catholic or whatever. And he starts jabbering on, and he told me that God was on my side. I said, well, you know, this is not really right. And he chattered on a bit more, and God is on your side. I said to myself, if he says that again, I am walking out of here. Sure enough, not 5 minutes later, God is on your side. I got up and walked out. So I had no interest in this God fear thing.
Right. Interesting. Okay. Very good.
So
Did you? No one stopped you from, even though you were going.
no, they probably figured I was going to go throw up or something. So
Okay.
you know, they didn't say anything.
So it was just a different kind of mindset. I mean, than the God fear. I mean, it's a different outlook.
Right. There's a certain. I mean, I had a certain kind of confidence within myself. That,
Right.
You know, if the hot lead was flying, well, I'd be on the ground or behind a tree or watch. You know, just awareness, and awareness are like the three most important things.
Right. Right. Well, so then tell me about what happens after you get there. You're deployed to where?
Yeah. Okay. So they had a program called DEROS. I don't remember exactly what all the words are. You can check it out. DEROS, and that was something about your estimated time of leaving. And everybody came in singularly. Nobody went in off this plane as a troop or a group. Everything after the first year in Vietnam was they sent 2 or 3 guys to wherever they were. They had openings. Openings means somebody was killed and they were filling their shoes. And I got sent to the Delta, and I was in Alpha Company, 3rd Battalion, 47th Infantry Regiment, 2nd Brigade, Mobile Riverine Force, 9th Infantry Division. And when I got there, they were in their base camp on the Mekong, which was called Mytho, M-Y-T-H-O. Or actually, that was the city close by. Dong Tam was the naval base. They had dredged up a certain portion of the river and made a base out of river bottom, which was nothing but really fine red dust. So if the breeze blew, it was just covered with dust, just like you would be in a sandstorm in Iraq. So I get to Alpha Company, and I'm the only guy. You know, I'm a new,
Right.
what we call an FNG.
Yep.
And put my bags down, and at that, but there they had barracks-like things. They certainly weren't mortar-proof or anything, because and they were just wooden apartment. No, it's not apartment, but big wooden buildings.
Right. So they're bigger than a hooch, but more.
Oh, yeah, they're like an apartment size, maybe half an apartment size building.
Okay.
But they had 2 levels, and this was for the Mobile Riverine Force, and there was 4 companies. We had 4 companies, 4 battalions. There was a 3rd of the 47th, 4th of the 47th, 3rd of the 60th. There's 3, and there's 3. There must be one more I can't think of. And then there was mech units that operated in Mytho, Dong Tam area. So I get there that first night, and it was Alpha Company's turn to ride the armored personnel carriers that would run the road down from Dong Tam to Tan An, some kind called the French Fort, and make a loop on Highway 4 and come back. So I'm new.
Right.
What are you going to do?
Right.
I got all my fresh stuff, and I've had my 5 days of acclimatization stuff, and I get out there, and the first thing I see is, here's the first APC, armored personnel carrier. On the front of it is a quad 50. So well, I guess I'll get on that one.
Yeah.
It seemed like I'm in the front, got a quad 50, what could go wrong? And we get on and everybody's loaded up, and all these guys are like sitting on top. There's nobody inside of these things that I could really tell. I mean, I was on top. I could see other guys on top behind me, and there's a quad 50 in the front. There's like 1, 2, 3, 4 carriers behind me, and then another quad 50 in the back. And I sure hoped he knew how to turn that thing around. And we get to rolling down the road, and we're rocking. We're taking on a clip, in an armored personnel carrier, a track. We're going like 35, 40 miles an hour, and bam! Man, our armored personnel carrier came up off the ground. Whoa, and it threw us all up, threw me off. It was hit. We hit a mine. Nothing really hurt the mine, so I mean, it was a big explosion, but nobody got killed. It didn't stop it from moving or anything. So all of a sudden, the guys that were running the personnel carriers, right off the bat, they turned this quads 50 to one side, the other quad 50 on this side, and all of a sudden we're getting fire. So this is midnight. It's like late at night, dark, pitch dark.
And this is your first real...
My first night. Well, not the very first night, but first night in
where you're supposed to be, right?
Supposed to be. I got down and locked and loaded, and I could see where fire was coming from, and you return fire. And then pretty soon it stopped. Everybody regrouped and got back on, and I guess we finished the route. Whoa. I don't think anybody got hurt that night. We didn't have any dust-offs.
Right.
It was more like a mini ambush.
Right.
We're going to F with you every chance we get. And if I was them, that's what I'd be doing.
This is Viet Cong.
Yeah, this is Viet Cong.
Yeah. They're just messing. So you think they're messing with you more than anything, or are they trying to?
I think they were. If they could have taken people out, they would do. Yeah. That was the intent. But to make it seem like this road was going to be safe for anybody to walk up and down at midnight, the VC owned Vietnam at night.
Yeah.
We didn't do any operations at night unless they were ambush patrols of some kind.
So this was your first. You get knocked off, thrown off.
Yeah.
That
wild.
Yeah. Did you? I mean, that's just got to be just a totally surreal thing. You're just there and
Mama, come get your baby boy.
Right.
And this is not where I want to be.
Yeah.
And I got thrown off, and I can remember the hole that I fell into. It's like it's on the sides of the road. There's ditches, berms, and
Yep.
Like most roads. And I was in it. It was muddy, and I did manage to keep my barrel clean and that kind of stuff. And so you're watching for a ground attack. I mean, that was my first thought. But outside of receiving small arms fire, that was just about it. Bam, 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 and then pretty soon it just tapered off. It was not like a firefight.
Yeah, it's just
a quick ambush, not far from Dong Tam, which is the naval base there. So within a mile, I would say. That's the nail is.
Did you? How do you? So you get back on and you regroup and then you just finish it out. After, did you even sleep that night, or how do you process all of that that experience? And this is probably everything you'd thought you'd heard or maybe even dreaded.
It was not at all like nothing.
No?
There's nothing like any of those creepy Hollywood war movies. I think, as I recall, we all got off the APCs, checked ourselves out. Some medics there to make sure nobody else was hurt. And obviously, I mean, I could have had a real spinal injury from where I landed. And it may have happened, but you can't prove anything like that. So anyway, I was still walking ambulatory and I didn't see any blood running. And so we're in barracks. You go to your cot and take off your hat and hope to God they don't start murdering you.
Yeah.
Because They did on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Regular, I mean, like, they never didn't not mortar. I mean, incoming was constant. Although in the second night I was out on berm of Dongtam, and I'd say it's probably, maybe a quarter mile from one side to the other. Not very big, but big enough for us to load up a lot of boats. And they would take us off to the big Navy ships, and they would go up and down the Mekong. More about that. So I was on a berm watch, and so there was sandbags and a box with sandbags all over it and holes like you would see in the movies, sandbagged, and for us to watch to make sure Charlie wasn't going to come in over the berm in the perimeter. Well, I must not have been paying attention in training, because I'm often looking off in the distance towards the inside of the perimeter. These red flares were going off. Red flare. Another red flare. Hey, Sarge, what's with these red flares? I hadn't paid attention. That means incoming. So all of a sudden, they must have had some kind of radar, and bam, kabam, kabam. They were walking mortars up and down the barracks. Fortunately, I was not in the center of that, and I don't know what happened to any of those people. You never know about things like that.
Right.
But so the next job was to get on your position and watch for movement. And there wasn't any movement. They can get anywhere around Dongtam and mortar in, shoot in a few mortars, and then by the time the choppers would get up and you would see them out there, they would stop mortaring, but you'd see those helicopters up there with their machine guns, and you could see the tracers. They're shooting at something. You don't know what. Could have been innocent people, could have been anything. But you can't see at night, and you think you see shooting coming from someplace. They had no clue where they were shooting. They were just shooting to shoot. So that was...
And this is night number 2. Are you thinking, what the hell have I gotten into?
Well, I did know that I would not be staying in this Dongtam for but another week. So a few more days later, we started loading up to go up the river. So everybody takes their belongings and then helps with S3 and S2 and that kind of thing, loading munitions and that kind of thing. And we load them onto these armored personnel carriers, which was like a World War II landing craft where you see the ramp comes down in the front. But they're not remakes or redos. They're actually manufactured for this operations, which is up and down rivers and canals for amphibious landings. So I mean, I was in the Brownwater Navy, and as a soldier. The Navy owned all the boats and they ran all the boats, but it was the Army that was using them.
And so you're rivering. What is that? What is your main goal when you're running those boats? Is it troop transport? Or is it combat, fire?
Combat.
Is it okay?
Combat, and more combat.
Okay.
So we'd load stuff, and we'd get over to the larger ships. Now, I was on the USS Colleton, which I handed off a cigarette lighter that has a hole in it from getting wounded. I mean, I still got wounded, but my cigarette lighter took a huge hit. I mean, it's a solid steel Zippo, and it's just ripped. So I was on the Colleton both 3 times that I was there. So you would be on the river for 3 months and then off for a month. And each battalion rotated like that. Like I would be on with the 4th of the 47th and the 3rd of the 60th. And then one of those would get off, and that other company that I can't think of now, battalion, would go on. So you're on there for 3 months. So these armored troop carriers, ATCs, armored troop carrier, they would carry enough for at least a company, enough of those boats would carry a company for a landing. And then there was enough for all the other companies that were in there. Plus you had your Alpha boats, which had a 20 millimeter turret in the front, and it was all padded. But boy, I remember when S3 was using an Alpha boat, and Sergeant Pinner was in my AIT, Advanced Infantry. So I knew one person when I got there. Well, he took an RPG in the chest, so his days were over. And then, so we load up the ships, and so you're on a big ship, and actually they have showers and pretty regular meals. I mean, you get hot meals. It's a Navy ship. So unless you're out on the boondocks where you're surviving on sea rations and coconuts, meals on the ship weren't bad, and they were always, I remember getting shrimp and lobster. They'd buy whatever they could from local vendors and feed us. So everybody's on the big ship, and alongside the ship are all these APCs and ATCs, Alpha boats, CCB, which was our typical S3, because I was an S3 after about 6 or 7 months.
Okay, what does that mean for people in it?
Well, S3 is operations.
Okay.
What happened was I was really good with maps. Thankfully for the Boy Scouts, I could read a compass, and I knew how to do maps and how to plot positions. So they kept coming to me for the first 5 months. They would take me out of Alpha Company and go see Colonel Bland and whoever else, and Sergeant Major. And says, okay, here's a list of our objectives. And they'd give you a X-ray Sierra 683 9er 4, X-ray Sierra da-da-da-da-da. And they'd give me a map, piece of plastic, and plot those on this map. So these are objectives in the sense that when Alpha Company, that would be the company I'm in, we're going to be a blocking force, we're supposed to be at this particular spot. Everybody knows where we are on this particular map. Charlie Company got it, Bravo Company, Echo Company. Echo Company was not weapons because we had no mortars. The only mortars we had were 4 Deuce, and they were on ships or back in base camp. So there was no mortars going anywhere. So our heavy weapons for a typical company was a leg unit.
Okay.
All right. So where was I now?
Let's talk about so you're on these transport ships. You're a riverine part. What's average day? What is your job, and what's an average day like? I mean, if it's combat and troops, I mean, that's got to be. Do you ever have the same day twice?
Oh yeah, lots of the same days.
Okay.
There'd be orders come down. This company, this platoon, show up at 0, what we call British first light, and then there's first light. So you'd be showing up at like 4 a.m. On the main ship's dock, and then the armored troop carriers would come up and they would load us on. Where we're going, nobody really knew. We were just troops. So you have Navy guys that are on top of these things, and they're going to drive the boat somewhere. The captain or the lieutenant was with us. Occasionally the captain was with us, but usually it was a lieutenant, a platoon leader, not always a platoon leader. If he was dead, we'd be waiting. So there'd be a sergeant or somebody. Then these go up the rivers, and maybe going up a canal. In this case, Rack Run Canal up to, say, Kailai, Kaibei, Sadek, Vinlong. Well, actually not Vinlong, but So you get like a line of these armored troop carriers, probably 15 or 20, spaced in various formations. We're going up, say, towards Kailai and Kai Bay. And then these canals, they kind of loop around. And one particular one that I remember a lot of was that when we got to the first part is what we call Snoopy's Nose, they waited until all the boats were clear around on the other side. So there's not a lot of distance in this loop. So then they started firing. The VCs laid in an ambush at us, which is what they should be doing. And these guys that are on this side of Snoopy's Nose, now this is a big loop, they couldn't shoot back because
they were in the
because we had friendly troops still on boats on here. And that day was interesting because we got a brand new company commander. It was his first day. It was his first operation.
Wow.
Normally in a situation like that, we attack the ambush. And we did attack. We did go in, shooting into keeping the fire down low. A lot of guys got off and got in, but there were several who couldn't. And then the command was pretty loud to retreat. We were still leaving guys there. We couldn't really do that. I mean, that was not a good thing to do. Of course, I'm having a lot of flashbacks now, and some of them are confusing, but there was a couple of guys from Alpha Company that couldn't get out. We went back into it to get them, and there was a huge fire, so we had to have more help for suppressing fire because they had automatic weapons.
Right.
And we managed to get these two guys. One was wounded, and I guess they were both wounded, but we got them both back to the boats. And so the whole thing was a retreat. So all the boats were going to move back down, turn around. Now, it's really difficult to do this. What happened, the tide came in, and so there's a lot of water, but underneath that water is lots of reeds. So, I mean, if the tide hadn't come in, we would have a lot further to get out. But the fact that it did come in, trying to wade through these weeds just to get to our troop boats to get out of there, and hot lead was flying. I remember when, oh God, there was another story. So we finally got back out of there, and then a little while later, not a little while, very shortly after, I knew I was on my carrier, and we were missing a couple of guys who probably didn't come back. If you're new, that's the thing about the D-Bros. You didn't know anybody, so you didn't have time to make these buddies. You were just a loner. Everybody went in as a loner. So as they're moving back, the VC had the radio frequencies, and they called for Echo Company to land again. So the commander says, well, for Echo Company to go ahead, or they thought the commander was saying that, so they landed. Wow, and they got ripped up again.
So the VC thought that the VC tricked him into landing again.
Yeah.
Basically coming right into the mouth of the lion.
Right. They told them to land, and that armored troop carrier, I think there was like 3, and boy, when they went in, they got hot lead. They were a mess when they got done. I don't know what the casualty rate was there, but that was that commander's first and last day.
Wow.
Yeah, he was gone. I don't remember his name. I could remember a guy's name. You can't remember anybody's name.
Right. So you finally were able to get out of there, but not without loss.
Yeah, not without loss.
And it was sounds like a clever enough ambush. These people were not.
One operation, when the landing craft comes down, there's these cords that make it go up, make the ramp go up and down.
Yep, like a cable.
Right, it's a cable.
Okay.
Those VC were so good that when we went for this operation, I don't remember if we were a blocking force or we were going to sweep, but as soon as we're coming up the river and all the boats swung into the beach and those ramps go down, bam, all at once, they had those RPGs go pew, 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 cutting those cords off. So if you're dragging your boat, you're going to sink the thing.
Right.
On mine, I think only one cord was snapped because they were able to get it up enough so, and I don't remember what happened after that. I know we hit the beach. I know that I had a chance to pick up a BC flag, but you never want to pick up stuff like that. It's
for booby trap.
Yeah. It's I picked up some Tudia signs, which is a metal plate with a sign written in tar, telling the local people this place is mined. So I just walked on by. But
Right. Is it is every day? Are you getting sniped at or fire from the VC? Is this because I imagine if you're on a river craft,
you're a fish, you're like a duck.
Yeah, because you can't just run back. You've got to stay in the water.
Yeah, right. And some planes, the Mekong is pretty wide. I mean, it's always wide. So in the middle, there was a number of times, and they would shoot RPGs at the big boats. But they were smart enough to know that wasting their ammunition at an armored armored troop carrier wasn't going to do anything. They had to do something after we hit the beach. So, as soon as you hit the beach, that's when you nail them. Or if there's any kind of a movement going a different direction, anytime there's a change, and they would know.
They take advantage of the switch.
Yes, yeah.
This sounds like sometimes the Viet Cong had been portrayed as a bunch of ragtag citizens.
World's greatest fighter.
Do you think so?
World's greatest fighter.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, they made bombs out of nothing. They won.
Right. Did you? So let's talk about you were combat wounded.
Oh yeah.
Tell me about that.
We were in Can Tho, which is the old capital of Vietnam. Oh, I have to tell about the story before.
Okay. Tell me.
This is a funny story. Well, it's not that funny. So we're sitting just a little west of Vinh Long, which is a pretty large town on Highway 4, although there's no bridge anymore to get there. But so the commander tells me we're out of maps, that I need to get a Boston whaler, which is, I don't know if any people know what a Boston whaler is, but it's a little tiny plastic raft, kid stuff. And I'm going to go down to Vinh Long to the Army intelligence office there, where they have all these maps. I mean, you just cannot operate without maps. They're just without maps and a red flashlight. So I get in the Boston whaler with the Navy guy, and he takes me down there. I have a .22 pistol my dad had sent me, and a knife on one side and a pistol on the other. Like a.
Right.
I don't know why my dad wanted to say, well, it was nice. So
right.
I think probably the only thing he ever sent me. So I go down, I get off the dock, and I walk maybe 20 yards. It's on a wooden plank, it's like lots of docks. And they've taken me to the right spot. And as soon as I walk into this spot, there's an MP. I didn't have any name tags on. I didn't have any ID on. I hate that stuff.
Right.
So I didn't have a name tag on. I did have my bush hat on, but I had a knife and a pistol. He told me to put my hands on, put them up against the Jeep. He frisked me down. He busted me for concealed weapons in a combat zone. And they put me in the hoosegow. They put me in the slammer. I said, I'm here to get these maps. Well, so they said, well, you'll have to call your company. At that particular time, the company, the battalion, the brigade, the 2nd Brigade was moving from just west of Vinlong, and they were headed, how did I know, but towards Cantho, which is towards Cambodia. Well, they changed all the call signs. I couldn't call my battalion. I couldn't call my company. I couldn't call brigade. I finally had to go through 9th Infantry Division to call brigade, to call the battalion, to call some people to come and get me out of this hole and bring the maps back. So they sent 2 officers, a captain and a lieutenant, down back to get me in Vinlong. By that time, the monsoon had started. Now, not every year is a big monsoon. They fluctuate. So,
Right.
But this one was the big deal. I mean, this was a main monsoon season where others aren't. So they bailed me out of jail, and on this Boston whaler. And these 2 officers are really mad because they're soaking wet. The whaler's full of water, and so we went back. It was another 3 miles. They had gotten that far up the river. So I mean, it was a long drive in a Boston whaler, pouring rain, but the maps were dry. And I got back to the Colleton, USS Colleton, and got the maps made. So from then on, we continued on up to Cantho. We get off in Cantho, which is pretty cool. We got to stop and look around, and had a day or two to, enjoy the scenery. There really wasn't much going on there. But just south of Cantho is the Yumin Forest, where 500 French troops went in and never came out.
Okay.
So we know that this area could have been pretty nasty. We did have one operation there because a bunch of SEALs went in and never came out, so we had to go look for them, and they never did come out. So we're sitting in Cantho, and this was like January 1st, 2nd?
Okay.
I can't exactly remember when Tet Offensive started.
But this is the beginning?
Yeah, so on the day that the Tet Offensive started, we were in Cantho, which is clear to the other end from the South China Sea. It's like, clear to the other end of Vietnam. Oh man, so all of a sudden there was guys getting on choppers, there was guys getting in boats, and we're headed to wherever. I don't know where the battles were happening, but I was in every major battle. Of course, they're all major, up and down the Mekong River, Kai Lei, Kai Base, Vinlong, Sadek. The heavy one was Mito. So it was in Dong Tam. I got wounded during a mortar attack, which was still during the Tet Offensive. So we had gotten off, rotated, and it was one night where they hit the mess hall, and they knew where S3 was because they pounded our little thing. But I was outside of it. I was going to our medical thing to bring back medical supplies. Bam! Well, I went flying, but my head says, there was another guy with me. And we were rushing out of the thing, and I'm hit. I'm falling on the floor. I'm knocked down. I mean, I got hit in like all over my body, my stomach, my legs, my feet. So I know I'm hit. And my thought was, God, don't move. They're not going to have another mortar hit this spot. And this other guy, he wanted to run across the thing, and I think, God damn, that's not the idea for me.
Right.
I'm going to stay put because they're walking the mortars. I mean, that's how you do.
Right.
Get those crazy guys that are trying to run. So I could see, go bam, I could see them hitting. So then I ran, and I got to the bunker. They had bunkers there in Dong Tam, which is the base where we were the last. So that's when I got wounded during that was March. But all during the end of January and February was just massive combat, day in, day out.
How do you mentally deal with that day in, day out? I mean, you get into a situation where it doesn't seem to stop. How?
Yeah, you hear a lot of guys talk about boredom. Well, there wasn't a lot of boredom during this particular time. Just getting your weapon clean and trying to get enough munitions, and store a couple extra magazines and help out S4, S3, and then in between time, S5, which was the charity section of the military. They were out giving shots and tossing out candy and stuff like that. I went on all of those. I look forward to getting on a truck and going out with the S5 officers, and they were inoculating, going to local villages and that. And there was a library also there in Dongtam. So if a guy wanted to stay busy, there was that. And I had my drawing book. I did a lot of artwork. One of the things I found out was I started drawing people or their wives from pictures or whatever. The first 5 or 6 guys I drew pictures of, KIA. I said, well, there's something here, Of course, an atheist don't really buy that nonsense, So,
Right.
But whoa, even Sergeant Pinner, I had just finished a picture of his wife, and he took out an RPG. So I said, I wouldn't do that. But there was a lot of stuff to do to keep yourself busy. And then there was a lot of card games. The blacks loved to play cards. And I enjoyed hanging out with them. They were always fun. I got wounded.
Sure.
Yeah, I got wounded. So, the triage, which is like MASH, the MASH unit, it was wiped out that night. It just direct hit. So they had to fly me. I think I was probably the only one wounded that night, because I don't remember anybody else. So they fly me to 25th Evac in Saigon, because any time you're flying in a chopper over Vietnam, 1, it's pretty, and 2, you could get killed, because they know how to shoot helicopters down, and so that's always scary. But I made it to 25th Evac, which is the main hospital there. It's an old French hospital, and I still will never forget those big high ceiling fans, the blades turning, and Martha Ray, the comedian, she was doing shows there. But I'll also talk about how I hated those things.
Okay.
Especially the ones with the girlies in them. Okay, so,
Right.
but...
So Nancy Sinatra, no.
No. So, no.
All right, I had to ask.
I know. So, but the first thing is they're taking me off the chopper. I think I was on a gurney. I don't know why. I mean, I did walk a little bit, but I guess, they had me pretty well wrapped up. But the first thing I see off to my left as we got out of the chopper was this big pile of boots. Fuck. That hit home hard. A big stack of boots. Whoa, this could only mean dead guy's boots.
Yeah.
Or amputees' boots, and everything. It did not sit well. So I was in 25th Evac for 3 weeks. That was February, March. I got wounded one of the first 3 days in March.
Okay.
So at the end of March, I get out. They give me 3 days to get back to my unit. Whoa, 3 days. So I took a taxi and I drove around Saigon.
Okay.
Oh, now see, the Tet Offensive had already hit. So Cholon, a number of these other districts, you could see there was not much left. And then I thought, well, hell, I might as well just take a bus back. So I got on a Vietnamese bus. And I had my uniform on. I had my M16. I think a small duffel bag. I got on there, and it was all Vietnamese. You could see the motor inside the running inside. It's very quaint. And they were all nice to me. All of them were nice to me. And I said hello to all of them. And I don't know if they were glad to have me on there because I could have been a target. To myself, I'm thinking, they're not going to kill one guy on a busload of Vietnamese. I mean, just simply not make sense. And nothing ever happened. But I did get to see what happened to Mito, a town that I had fought in. And actually, the VC did come in on buses there. And you could see a lot of burned out buses. So they just commandeered a bunch of buses and came in by buses and took over Mito, which is, a city of maybe 10, 15,000. I mean, it was huge.
Okay,
It's not a village. And so I got to see that. And then I called for a helicopter when I was in Mito to come and get me. And they did. So then after that, then I met wifey in Hawaii for 5 days R&R. She got sunburnt and was in the hospital for 3 days. It was a marriage that never should have been. It was an iceberg. I spent 15 years trying to warm up an iceberg. Now she lives on an island off the coast of Alaska. So anyway.
Is it hard if you're injured in combat? Is it hard to just go back into it?
I was kind of wondering about that. I got wounded, but no, I was ambulatory. I didn't have that. I got to stay with my unit mentality. What am I leaving behind? All these poor guys, they can't live without me. I didn't have any of that. I was, they patched up my leg, and there was one surgeon at the first operation. He was trying to take stuff out of my foot. I don't know. I must have come out of a coma and said, "Are you an orthopedic surgeon?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Well, get the fuck out of my foot." And he did. And so the shrapnel's still there. I suppose you're going to have to edit some of this. But
No.
So I made it back to my unit, and that would have been March and April. And so I still have left till October to go. So there was still a lot of operations left.
When you're out there, one of the things that people have said is it's when they're honest with themselves, they've said it was a heck of an adrenaline rush, not necessarily in a Rambo style, but just you're so alert and it's so intense that there's not a real feeling like that. Is that true?
The only peaceful time is when the shit was hitting the fan.
Really?
Yeah. Because all the other time you're in this anticipation, and that the adrenaline rush is there. So all of a sudden, you walk into an ambush, or you're expecting something from a tree line, and you do get it, and you're able to get down behind a berm or a bank, or bury your head in the sand, mud. That was a little more peaceful when the actual bullets were flying. And then, I carried a radio quite a bit, so I was not far from a lieutenant, which is always a target zone. And I did have a couple of bullet holes in one of my radios when I got back once. And whoa, I don't know if I carried a radio after that.
Right.
But I did take a hit. So if he wanted to call in artillery or whatever,
Is that your job? When you're on the boat, are you radio? Are you communications? Are you?
Oh, you kind of could change around. Some guy would carry a radio. Some guy would carry extra machine gun ammo, or some guy would carry. They devised a way of carrying ammunition for a recoilless rifle. This guy had made some sort of like a sawed-off 106 recoilless. So there would be somebody to carry ammunition. So I carried the radio for a while, just because I wanted to do that.
Okay.
So it was a job opening.
Right. So what you had a lot of shrapnel. Do you still have? Were they able to remove it, or is there still some?
No, I still have shrapnel in my left foot. Doesn't set off any meters at the airport or anything, but
right. When you got hit and you had that cognition, that thought, I've been hit. What's the next thought after something like that?
How how bad am I? How bad is it? How much is the, I could see blood coming pretty fast out of my right leg, and you could sort of feel the blood filling up in the boot on my left side. And I knew that since we were at Dongtam, I knew the bunkers were not far away. So as soon as I knew that the mortars were walking away from me,
You could.
I hightailed it into that bunker.
Yeah.
And there was one bunker, and this is
Yeah.
after I'd been wounded, but I was still in the bunker. We were still in our 30 days at Dongtam before we went back on the ships again. And I'm sitting there with S3, and a snake comes crawling by. This little green snake. And I reached in and I grabbed it, behind the back of the head. And I said, "Hey, look what I got, Lieutenant." And he said, "You know what you got there?" I said, "No, but it's a pretty green snake." And he said, "That's a banana viper." So out the window, I threw the snake. You just, things happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Almost reflexively. So, how does an artist look at Vietnam? Through your eyes? I mean, you had a little different view because you could sketch. You saw things slightly different. So I want to know how an artist sees Vietnam.
I tried to keep a dry drawing book with me, and I could sometimes, if you were doing a sweep of some area, you would run across maybe there'd be a village of some kind, or if we were near some place where I could get drawing paper, I couldn't always get it, but I did keep some dry, and I would draw the guys, and they're, I'd have them out there on the dock, and I'd draw them, or they would say, "Hey, can you draw a picture of my wife?" And he'd give me a picture of his wife, and I'd draw a picture of his wife. But I never sat there and drew pictures of rice paddies and nipa palms or incoming or outgoing. I didn't draw anything having to do with war pictures. I still haven't, still won't. It's just my art is totally separate from that.
Sure.
And even today, I don't do commissions. It's whatever comes out of me is what's going to be there. So it was good for me. It was good for people who got pictures. And I was able to paint one picture. I had some ink that I found and some matting board. Somebody got that painting of a Vietnamese girl. Every now and then, yeah. So if you're in Dongtam, or I don't know what these guys did in fire support base. I don't know about them, but Dongtam was big. It had a big fire support base, and 8 inches enough to make you go deaf. But they had people who would come in and clean the captain's cabin, and so I could get them to sit, and I would draw Vietnamese girls, or it was very therapeutic.
Was it a pretty country?
Oh, it was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous. You see those white egrets sitting out there, and the water buffalo, and the birds and snakes, and gigantic insects. I'm trying to think of the one that...
Scorpions?
No scorpions.
I've heard tell us of some of the scorpions, but that could have...
This is a war that has like 20 different types of battles. The Delta, I was at 8 inches below sea level the whole time. I never saw anything above 8 inches below sea level. But if you started moving further north, the terrain changed, the battles changed, everything changed. When you get further up there towards the DMZ, they saw a lot of NVA, whereas only occasionally, and during the Tet Offensive, we saw NVA, and they were taller. They generally had on that brown hat.
Right.
And you could see them running.
In the end, and so when you're fighting, is it kind of like lowland, riverland? What's the topography look
There's
like?
rice paddies. So, every rice paddy has a berm around it. So, it might be 50 yards from one end to the other, and across maybe 40, 50 yards. And up one side of that might be a whole line of palm trees, or nipa palm, what we call. heavy, so anybody could be hiding in there. You could have a whole troop hiding behind some of this stuff. It was so heavy. But they were on a way that you could walk. So if we were moving through, and we were sweeping, and the blocking force is on the other end, so you'd be walking through a rice paddy, and you'd be walking over this bump and to the next rice paddy, and then so you were constantly in water. So generally speaking, unless we were in contact, we were out for 3 days, and then back on the ships to dry out.
So it was pretty wet, and that had to be bone chilling. I mean,
we lost more guys to drowning. And like the book I showed you, if you're crossing these canals to get from one side to the other, so you got your radio on, you got your ammo, you've got your weapon, and you got to go across. I mean, you get down and the mud sucking you in. So it's just to get across. And so some guys drowned. A lot of guys drowned. And the 9th Infantry, they probably lost more to drowning, it seems. Yeah, it's a lot of... One time I fell off a log, so there was the only way to get across was everybody had to walk across this log. Well, the Vietnamese, they don't wear shoes. And they got feet that spread over everything, like prehensile toes.
Right.
But all we had was our combat boots, and they just like slicker and greased owl shit when you step on a wet log to go across. So I fell into the mud, wedged up like in a V shape, and they tossed me a rope and pulled me out. And on we went. But a little while later, we were in some pretty serious combat, and I captured a BAR. It's a Browning automatic rifle. It has that 45 thing up there. Man, I don't know if I shot at the people or killed anybody there, but I do know I was the first person onto that gun as we were moving in. So I captured this BAR, and the lieutenant, he commandeered it. And then I was, over there you see where we had stacked the bodies. It really bothered me a lot. Stacking their bodies. We had no business there from day one. There's nothing but a State Department, Wall Street bankers war. And what's his name, Snidely from the U.S. Marine Corps, who wrote the book, War is a Racket. It is a racket. In Vietnam was the biggest waste. When I got to the wall, 2003, my daughter works for the National Science Foundation in D.C. She was at work, and I'm out touring D.C., and I wanted to go to the wall.
Okay.
I got there. I looked at her for like about 8 seconds, and then I just heaved my guts out. Right there in front of those roses. There was no roses in front of it, but there's roses to the side of it. My name could have been on that wall. For what? Just this stinking U.S. State Department creating more wars wherever we go. They create them in Iraq, they create them in Libya, they create them in Ukraine, $5 billion to destabilize the Ukraine. The U.S. State Department is the problem with the world today.
Yeah. Let's talk about your views back then too, because I think it's interesting. You weren't real. You weren't real. You didn't want to go into this war anyway because you were politically astute. You did. How is going to war when you may not agree with it?
Oh, jeez. Yeah. As I look back, I kind of put a shell around myself that I have my views, but I still have to do something to, I carried my weapon and my head was clean and I was ready for combat. But there was a lot of times I didn't want to be there. I was up for 9 Article 15s, failure repair. But the one article for when I got caught for the not having my name tags on, God, I was such a recalcitrant soldier. I had an Article 15 come down, and they wanted to court-martial me for not having name tags on. So this was like a month or so after that. This thing comes down from 4th Corps headquarters. I was in 4th Corps the whole time. So you have I Corps on down to 4th Corps, and then Sergeant Major of the battalion calls me into the XO's office. There they're both, one sitting, one standing. And they pull out this letter, read it to me, that I'm supposed to be held on charges for such and such. I'm not having my name tags and this kind of thing. It had been long when I went back to get those men. XO looked at me and he goes, threw it in the wastebasket.
So you didn't that you didn't feel so.
Thank you, officer. Have a nice lunch. So,
Right.
you just cope. It's just simply a matter of coping. As far as drugs went, nobody smoked dope. Nobody that I know of, any of the platoons, any of the battalions, there was just no time, no place. In smoking, it's like, hey, tell the enemy, this is where you are.
Right.
Another thing that really bothered me, every C ration came with those little 5 packs of Marlboros. Here, boys, get them young, teach them wrong, and tell them it's right. Smoke them Marlboros. You're a soldier. So they free Marlboros. That's how cunning Wall Street is.
Right.
So I didn't like that.
What do you? So let's talk about getting out of the country. What was that experience like for you when your date finally came up, and what was leaving Vietnam like?
So I'm going to de-rose out of country October 10th, which is the same day I came in. At that particular time, we were down in an area called Ben Tre, which we had never conquered. We were going to set up a new fire support base, a new base camp. And so the Navy had come in, and I was, with their boats, laid us all off, and they had a couple of D8 cats in there. And they were pushing up a berm just off the river. So there was something like a base being built. It was probably 100 yards from one side to the other, and maybe from the river, maybe 75, 100 yards. And they had D8 cats that had pushed that up. They had put a couple of wooden boxes down for S3 and S2. I mean, a wooden box, half the size of this, about from here to the wall. They hadn't even had it sandbagged yet. Well, I never filled a sandbag in Vietnam.
You're the first person I've talked to that has that story.
Well, anybody in the Delta will probably tell you that story because there's no sand. There's just mud.
Okay.
So I'd never filled a sandbag. In any case, there was no sandbags around these guys either. Just a wooden box. So I'm getting ready to leave. And I know I'm short. And people are concerned, if you're short, they'll kind of let you hang back. You don't have to go out and do an ambush patrol. So that first night, well, that was the only night, they had cots for us, which is unbelievable. I mean, here we're out in the boondocks, and the S4 put cots for everybody inside these tents. I'm trying to recall this now. So something did not seem right about this, but in any case, I'm on a cot, and you start hearing these funny, that's incoming. Then the dogs are barking, and then you hear the dogs squealing because they hit the dogs. And so there's tent, ba-bam, ba-bam. It doesn't sound like incoming because the mortar was hitting the top of the tent or it was hitting water. It didn't sound like a, instant, whoa, incoming. Is this incoming? Bam, bam. And you hear screaming, and you hear the dogs because they all got hit. And that really bothered me too. And so I'm up, I grab my rifle, got my boots on. Do I tie them or just I run in them? That kind of thing.
Right.
The mortars are coming closer. Kabam, kabam. So I got to the berm, because the first thing you're concerned with is a ground attack. And they did try a ground attack, so I'm repelling ground attack, and mortars are going off inside the compound. The firing stopped off in front of me, so I wasn't having to shoot back at anything. I could see firing, and then you back up, and you shoot back, and that stopped. I don't know what happened, but so at that particular time, after I was there for like 6-7 months, I was with. I was no longer in Alpha Company, but I was in Headquarters Company, which obviously didn't really matter if you're Headquarters Company. You're still in the middle of the shit.
Right.
And I got back to the S3 unit and find out, well, what do you want me to go do? And they said, well, this tent's been hit, tent meaning a tent full of guys, so we got a lot of bodies to move. God, and so we're carrying these guys, as many as we could get to carry guys in the water. What happened was the tide came in at that particular time. So when I got out of my cot, the water was like right there. So I'm in water the whole time, so your boots are full of water. Everything you had was water. At least we had something to hang our rifles on, so they were dry and ammunition was dry. The firing stopped, and you can see the gunships are out there doing their thing, shooting whatever they could see just so they could make tracers go. They had no idea what they're shooting at. We carried about 3 guys out that had been killed while they were in their bunks. And then there's just one guy. He must have weighed 250. Big, huge guy. And we tried to get him, we tried to move him because we thought he was dead, but he was just drunk. He passed out drunk, so we didn't have to carry him very far. But then there was some other heavy guys. So heavy guys, when you're carrying them through water and mud and getting them over to S3, which is like, okay, there's no safety here. They got to mortar us again. They know this. I mean, the pair of binoculars and the VC, oh, wow, we have enemy in the open, fire away. So the idea was not to get clustered up, just try to get as far away as you can. So the next day, they knew I was short, and they were trying to say, well, you should probably get your ass out of here. I said, okay, somebody needs your weapon because theirs is not working. No problem. Give them the weapon, M16. Got on a chopper and straight to, I can't remember, it was Tonsonute or Bearcat, because Bearcat was the 9th Infantry Division headquarters. I don't remember which one it was. And they were processing me out, and the first thing they got to was, where's your weapon? Well, I left my weapon with my company because they needed it. Go back and get your weapon. Just fucking with it. Typical. And there was no reason for them to make me get on a chopper, waste all that money to go back and get my weapon and bring it back.
But they did.
But they did. So it's like getting arrested for carrying a concealed weapon. This is MP mentality. It's like these guys getting arrested in the newspaper. You read about it all the time. What was that little kid was busted for had an alarm clock in the newspaper today.
Yeah.
Did you read the paper?
Yeah. I've heard tell.
So much just total bullshit that they would make you do. So I went back, and every time you're in one of these choppers, your risk is just as high as it is in the water. Got my gun, or a weapon, flew back, and processed out, got on a plane full of guys again, just like the one we came in on. A couple of flight attendants. Plane's taken off the tarmac. I still can't remember. I think this was out of Tonsonute, which is Saigon. From Bearcat to Tonsonute's not very far. So as soon as we lift off, there's a huge cheer from everybody. And
Right.
when I landed in Oakland, cool, chilly, kind of like when I left. It's pretty just non-anything. It was like nothing. It's cold, it's chilly. Some guys, there was another guy with me. Let's go get a burger. Got a burger somewhere. It's cold and it wasn't very good. It's like all of a sudden, our whole world has changed. But I did not ever have any of the problems that some of these people talk about. I don't believe the spitting on GIs. I think that is a, what do they call, urban legend. I think it's all bullshit. I think, I just dare any soldier to come up and tell me you were spit on. I never heard baby killers. I never heard any of that stuff. So you get 30 days before you have to go to your next thing. They offered me, I could get an early out if I stayed another 4 months. No way in hell I was going to stay there one more second than I was forced to.
Right.
So I told them, where to put it. Got home, you get a 30-day R&R, 30-day leave. Then you have to be at your base. So my wife had moved from Los Angeles back to Jackson. She wanted Mom's approval. And then, so we drove to my next assignment, which would have been, was supposed to be in Kentucky. I can't remember that base. But then I ended up at Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And I was assigned for pushing troops, which is getting out there and doing basic training with them.
Okay.
And I went out there for one day, and I went back and I told the first sergeant, a company clerk, I said, I'm not doing this. You get me something else. I'll be the company clerk. I'll do something else, but I am not pushing one troop into that inferno that we shouldn't be in. Well, I don't know that anybody's been able to do that, but we'll see. So I ended up company clerk. I couldn't type. I lied. I said I could type, but I faked it, and I managed to type and do the company report, who's here, who's not here, who went to the bathroom, who didn't.
Right.
So I and my wife, we lived off base in Fort Jackson, South Carolina. And, that was an opportunity to get to see South Carolina, and I took advantage of that. You do your 8-hour job, you go home, and we had a trailer that we rented off base, and managed to see rainy nights in Georgia and other sites up and down the coast, and to see what people live like there. And I see all the money we're wasting in Vietnam, and there's so many poor people here that need what we're wasting. Nothing's changed.
Right.
I mean, we've got $5 billion to destabilize the Ukraine, but we don't have money for food stamps or a post office. So, so that was 1969, and I wanted to go to school. I had a buddy. He lost his leg at Dak To friendly fire, and we were buddies for a while, but things happened, and I went to the University of Wyoming, and I enrolled there. I wanted to be an artist, but I was smart enough to know that art doesn't happen in a classroom. You got to take a lot of other subjects. So I took English and all the subjects I could get. But we're doing it on $110 that's all they were paying for GI Bill. We were still on World War II GI Bill. I mean, it's like, so I ended up having to get 2 jobs. She had to get a job. So, and I'm trying to carry out a load and make something of this. We tried to get her into school, but that wasn't happening. So I managed to go through school. I had 2 kids. So I had a baby in September of '69, September 13th. And that was just when school was starting. So Jennifer, who's my daughter here with the grandkids here, she's the baby, and she's everything.
Right.
I mean, that's all I really wanted in life was a wife, 2 kids, and a picket fence.
Right.
A short one. I didn't want to, just for looks. And
Aesthetics.
yeah. So I went through school at the University of Wyoming. Wife wasn't happy. She left. She took the kids. I had 2 kids at that time. And I'm looking at my son and saying, I really don't need a degree to be an artist. So I moved back to Jackson and tried to make it there. I lived in Jackson for 13 years.
Okay.
I had, I worked for the Wyoming Highway Department. Then I had a chance to clean for this guy in his restaurant at the Open Range, which is not there anymore, but it was a French restaurant. They only served dinner. And hey, yeah, so I could make $600 a month just by cleaning this guy's restaurant at night. It took me 2 hours. Okay, this is an idea. And so I got that, and I said, well, I can clean another restaurant. So there's 2 more hours. Whoa. So I had a cleaning business, a Just Right Janitorial. We did windows and interiors and businesses, all kinds of stuff in Jackson. And so that would have been starting about 73, 74, 75, 76, 77. And that was going good until Carter and pulled out of the Olympics and the gas crunch. Nobody came to Jackson, and business wasn't good. And I had a gallery on the corner there in the square, and I was the program chairman at Rotary Club. Did a lot of hunting.
Yeah.
I mean, I killed a lot of elk.
Right.
And then, so the gallery wasn't doing well. I had to get loans out for that. I did own a house on the cusp of the forest and the city, so that was pretty cool. But I'd lived several places on the river and whatnot. And Jackson was a nice place back then. I wouldn't want to live there now.
Yeah. Did you have a hard time readjusting?
No, I don't. I had a hard time at school because at the University of Wyoming, and that was 69, 70, 71, 72. So in those 4 years there, I felt like I can't say a fish out of water, but these guys are talking about panty raids on sorority houses. And it's like, from where I've been, and you're talking about panty raids, it was just nothing for me to talk about with people.
Yeah.
Occasionally I'd meet somebody who was in a MASH unit in Korea or who might have been in the service. But the one thing I think that while I was there, and it still bothers me, even more so than Vietnam, the most disturbing thing was Kent State.
Okay.
Killing them on the campuses, I mean, that just changed me even further left. We are killing students on campus. So hit me so hard. Not that it was my sister's birthday, but Kent State on May 4th. That's when I was facing these goon squads with their masks down at Prexy's pasture with their guns. And here I am with my wife and little baby Jennifer standing right in their face. They didn't want us to demonstrate for peace. So I would have to say adjusting with that in mind made a huge difference.
Yeah. And you went on to demonstrate for peace.
Oh yeah, continually, still, even here.
Let's talk a little bit about that. Why?
Well, because I think the United States creates ways to destabilize and wreck other countries because Wall Street, the State Department, and the Pentagon. I think we have three branches of government. We have the Wall Street, K Street, and what I call the Statagon. Those are the three branches of government. And they're in collusion to create something that keeps the money going. There's nothing but profit in war for those people in Wall Street. There's nothing but rank for the military, because you don't make rank unless you've got action. And that's, if you create the action, you keep the money going, and guys make rank, and then after they make rank, then they retire, then they go to the State Department, or they go to Wall Street, and it's just so incestuous. Mm-hmm. So I demonstrated for peace. Okay, so let's see. I ended up getting divorced in 1981, moved to Seattle, and that's where I started PTSD clinics. 5 years I did PTSD, while trying to survive in Seattle, nice place. I lived on Vashon for a year. That was nice. Then high school reunions in 1984, 64, 84, 20-year reunion. I went back to LA, moved back to LA. And then I was getting more and more into the peace thing. So there was peace rallies pretty regularly on Hollywood Boulevard, down Wilshire Boulevard. I just got involved with more serious politics and with the people who were in the streets, the feet in the street.
Yeah.
So that was 84, 85, 86. From 84, 85, 86, 87, I was personal assistant to the mayor of Beverly Hills. That was pretty interesting. And I also drove a van for the movie studios. For 3 years, I was in the middle of all kinds of celebrities, and I was enjoying life there.
Yeah.
But whenever there was a peace demonstration I wanted to create, we had meetings at my house. This is back now in 04, when Kucinich was running. That's when peace protests were really developing. We've got a group called Hands on Democracy, and we met at my house. There's a lot of people in it that are doing well today. One's called the Soldiers Project, which is sort of therapy for soldiers who don't want to go to the Viet clinics, and those people were in it. So there was just a lot of peace demonstrations whenever possible.
Right. Tell me about the role of PTSD in your life.
Oh God, it's there. It's there daily.
How does that? Yeah.
There's not many days that I don't walk my perimeter every night. Now, what I'm watching for now is earwigs, slugs, and cats. So I have my little spray gun. I can shoot the earwigs and slugs, but I walk my perimeter. I check everything out.
Okay.
I still hear the helicopters, but they're not as bad as they used to be. Nightmares aren't as bad as they used to be, but I still have to be knocked out in order to go to sleep. I don't want to, if I lay there and things start going on, you don't want to go back to nightmares from Vietnam, because even some of them are not real. They're being chased through rice paddies you never saw before. The rice paddies are filled with blood. And so, I had a lot of those kind of nightmares. But so PTSD now is, you just kind of go with the flow. I check my perimeter every night. I'm a birder, so I'm always out looking for birds. So I channeled my awareness, my focusing on finding or seeing things. If you're out in the boonies, which in Vietnam, you're watching for movement. It's all about I got movement, or there's nothing happening. So it's there. It's always there. It doesn't go away. I don't watch any John Wayne stuff. I try to get people not to go watch that stuff. It'll ruin your mind. I have a hard time with the, with people who want to be heroes. I don't fit well with any Iraq or Middle East veterans. I think they wanted to go there to be a hero, or they were conscripted economically. And I feel bad for them. It's too bad they had to go through that to have a job.
Do you fit in with Vietnam? Fits?
If they realized that we had no business there and they didn't want to nuke the place, yeah, I can get along with them.
So is that I ask one of the questions that I've asked a lot is how do you now, with almost 50 years of history behind, and people always thank me for bringing out the math. Maybe I shouldn't do that, but 50 years looking back, how do you view it? Has your view of the war changed? Because it sounded like you weren't, and I don't want to sound flip or glib about it, too hip to it to begin with. So, but how has it? Has it modified in your book in 50 years?
No, it's the same thing. It's happening now. There is no change from the false flag that went on in the Gulf of Tonkin to the false flags of, I consider 9/11 a false flag, Iraq. All these things are just made up and created for those three branches of government, Wall Street, K Street, and the Statagon. Nothing's changed. It's the State Department is just out and out criminal. We have a government that won't prosecute war criminals over and over and over. It was war criminal after war criminal, but they're not going to prosecute. Obama, crypto-fascist, said, well, that's water under the bridge. But until we take responsibility like we should for international law and prosecute our war criminals, it's just going to keep on going. We're going to keep it the same Vietnam. It's going to be over and over and over. And tell me I'm wrong. Did that not happen in Iraq and Afghanistan?
It did.
Yeah. So I'm still out there saying, hey, we're doing Vietnam again.
What are people's response to that today? Hey, we're doing Vietnam all over. When you say that, what's the kind of general reaction you get?
Well, you know, my loop is filled with people who think the way I do. My last protest was against Condoleezza
Rice?
Torture Queen Rice. And the idiotic stuff that she and all that State Department people were doing. Well, I never thought they were going to come in with airplanes. Well, they had all this proof. They had all this intelligence. And they manipulated intelligence. And if you read the LBJ tapes, you'll see how they manipulated the intelligence coming in from Vietnam. Well, we need to get this war going. And I suggest anybody who's listening, check out the LBJ tapes and check out Jane Fonda's statement about why she was there. What was the question again?
You answered. I said, what are people's reactions generally?
You know, I was the only one protesting for Condoleezza, Torture Queen Rice. I got a lot of boos, and that's always a good sign. I protested. I got a group to protest against Cheney being here and against Bush being here, and whenever there's an opportunity to have a protest, and I've carried on a lot of protests here in front of Rehberg's office. And
does it surprise people? You know, I think that some of what's out there on the people who protested, does it surprise people when you're out there protesting and you tell them, hey, listen, I was a combat veteran from Vietnam? Does that take them back? Are they expecting that?
Yeah. They're my bumpers are filled with anti-war kind of stuff, prosecute torture. And I think they see me and they want to say something, but they see that Purple Heart on the license plate. So, How
do you reconcile? I want to ask you a question, and it's pointed, but it's okay.
Good.
How can you, a guy who participated in the combat and the war, have a Purple Heart for it and fired back? How do you reconcile that with your beliefs on war?
Nobody in my platoon, when I was in Alpha Company, or any other time that I had to go out, we were always generous and courteous to all the Vietnamese. I never hurt them. I never, if a guy's in black pajamas and he's 100 yards away shooting at you, well, you do your best to solve that situation. But I treated the people as nicely as I could be, and I made sure that everybody around me treated them. When other soldiers would come up to me and say, listen, these guys are protesting our being here back home. What do you have to say about that? Because they knew I was pretty politically savvy, and they came to me a number of times. How do we feel about this? I said, well, so they say that you're fighting here so that they can be free to express their opinion about what a piece of crap bullshit this war is, why we shouldn't be here, and we shouldn't be here. And then they went away scratching their heads, realizing, he's right. We have no business here. We never had any business here. I suppose if we had supported Ho Chi Minh, we'd have oil wells there today. But,
yeah,
there's a lot of things, you see, recall, the guy with the body bags, or not even body bags, and they're just with their boots are up and they're dead, just lines of guys dead, that kind of stuff, I'm glad I wasn't one of them. But I don't believe I injured anybody. I was not a Sergeant Calvin Gibbs, who's, a big Billings, he's Billings Chris Kyle. I have nothing but contempt for those people and those people who like those people. I have no sympathy for Chris Kyle and his ending. Bam, good riddance.
Right.
So, did I answer that?
Yeah. What about looking back? One of the reasons I'm doing this in this setting for this purpose is not just for today, but in the future when people have only to read books to get an idea of what Vietnam was like, when people who were there aren't here anymore. What do you hope they remember, or what do you need them to know about this, about Vietnam?
They need to study and read books. They need to go to the library. I remember Mr. Kerr speaking about Iran. Well, they've always been at war. But that's not true. They have not always been at war. Go read some books on this thing. They got thousands of years of history beyond over the U.S. And if you think they were always at war, you're just feeding your own head a bunch of bullshit. Go to the library. There's plenty of books in Iran, Middle East, what's going on over there, how those people got where they are, and why it's our fault that there's such turmoil, and the debacle that we've created over there is our fault. And who's at the top of that? Well, you have the Council on Foreign Relations. They may be the invisible head, but it's the U.S. State Department. Find out what they're doing and why they're doing these things. Why do we need to destabilize the Ukraine? Why is $5 billion worth that? So I would say, for the new people coming out of high school, educate yourself on what the politicians are doing and why. And these people are making big bucks from bankers and all kinds of, what's that big construction company? They did a lot of construction in Vietnam. And they did a lot in Iran. Of course, they got sued for bad water.
Yeah. Halliburton?
Halliburton and their offshoot. And, find out what's going on with these people. Don't join them. And then you have that other police thing. What's his place for this police private protection agency, and a bunch of those guys are
Blackwater.
Yeah, Blackwater. Yeah. Find out what's really going on here. These are not your friends. They are not the friends of anybody. They are your enemy. They are taking your money. They are taking money that belongs in our schools, money belongs in our education, in our health care, our infrastructure. They're just shooting it down the river, and there's nothing but blood here. There's nothing coming back.
Yeah.
The Iran deal, we should be involved. We should be friends with these people. We've tried to ruin them enough times already. well, I mean, I can go into the history of it, but read some books on Iran. They're really wonderful people. Syria, my God, that's the cradle of civilization there, and there's so much stuff. And they weren't at war. I mean, I heard that one of these guys, or several, well, they've always been at war. No, they have not always been at war. In fact, very little at war. You know, there were times when the Genghis Khan came through and wiped everybody out, and those sort of times. But they weren't what made their civilization so great.
Yeah. Would you say Vietnam for you, was it a good experience?
Well, it lasted about a century. I came out of it alive, and I'm able to tell people, you know, that what I saw and what I believe is to be real. And Jane Fonda is a hero. I voted for her. I wrote her name in when there was Carter and Reagan. I wrote in Jane Fonda's name because she was a world-class hero. People don't know that. They know they just hear all the stuff that's made up. But if you check out her story, you can see that it was all made up. People created a lot of problems for her. One photograph, she got in. She was tired and it was late, and they set her on this gun mount, and then turned her world upside down. And she saved a lot of people's lives. So she's a hero. And then the guy, George, who stopped My Lai. God, there's another hero. I mean, I can't speak enough about him. Well, I can remember his last name, but his George McCalley, I think. No, that Lieutenant Calley was his name. But you know, there were some really, really bad things that happened in Vietnam that really need to be brought to light. My Lai wasn't just one of them. There was some other Tiger battalions that were just ruthless. And I do remember when I first got there, they would take up detainees in a chopper, and they'd push one of them out, and the other one they would force him to talk about where this or where that was. So I would consider that above and beyond torture. So the war's still going on for me. I'm still trying to shove people's face in the lies and the deception and the blood that they cause for no reason.
Yeah, yeah. It's something that, so it's something that you continue to not necessarily live out, but act upon.
Yes, yeah. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm still acting on that.
Yeah. Yeah. What I know it's, like I've said in some of these, it's foolish to try to condense years of experience into a short interview. It's
1 hour and 22 minutes. How close are we?
We're almost at 2 hours.
Oh, wow.
That's okay. Everyone takes their own time. Oh. What have I missed? Anything that I need that needs your story that needs to be captured?
Yeah, I want the people that are thinking about joining the military to really think hard about what a dead-end job that is. There's nothing great about being in the military. It's just a job. You find a lot of lifers in there who spend their whole time off the government's tit. And they have nothing. I mean, I don't want to compare them to postal employees who spend their whole life delivering mail, but these guys, the military is not a good place to be. If you need an education in radio, whatever, or of course they don't have radio anymore, they have computers, find another way. The military is not gonna do you any favors. They're gonna lie to you, and they're gonna lie to you, and they're gonna lie to you. You're gonna end up with your wife in one place and you in another, and they're gonna say that they're gonna help you with her, and they don't. They don't do anything for you. They have a whole nother mission, and your salvation is not it. So to all those high school people who read, get to see this, find another choice. There's a lot better choices out there than being in the military.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I want to thank you for coming in and sharing what you shared today, and I want to thank you for I think it's a different thing when you say, yeah, I disagree with it, but I'm still willing to serve.
Yeah, I didn't have any choice. You know, if I could have gone to Canada, I mean, I suppose I could have, but on the other hand, I was looking forward to this GI Bill thing.
Yeah.
You know, so when I get out of it, paying like $110, I have a wife and 2 kids, and I had to get 2 jobs, and it was you know, war's a racket, and they weren't there to, and they're still not. They're not helping vets. I mean, our VA clinic here is good, and I appreciate them a lot. And all the VA clinics that I've been to are really good. They do have some problems administratively some places, but not here. I've always had good results with the VA, but that's not why you should get in the military.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my last words are, Daryl, I think you'll probably need a PTSD clinic when you're done with all of this.
I may, but I also I knew that I'd be asking tough questions. So, and that's part of what my job is too. So I do appreciate that. It's been my pleasure to talk with you today, Will. Thank you.
Thank you much, Daryl.
Yep. And this has been Vietnam Voices. I'm Daryl Ehrlich. I've been with Will Crain.